Hey, what you reading for?
The 10 lowest rated books on Goodreads that I have read. And some of the books on this list, I'm not surprised to find them here, but some of them I am genuinely surprised. I think it has to do with people's preconceived ideas about the writer or the expectations that were set for the book that the book didn't live up to. But in any event, I think that this is a good exercise for me to go through this list with you, because I am going to find something positive to say about each book on the list. And for some of these books, it's going to be quite a challenge. If you like books and you like opinions about books, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I will hand things over to the great American composer John Adams for the intro sequence, and I'll see you on the other side for the 10 lowest rated books on Goodreads that I have read. Kicking off the list, we have Psycho 2 by Robert Bloch, which comes in at an average star rating of 3.20. Now, I go into depth about this book on my video 1982, The Year in Horror. And I didn't like this book either, but it does have an excellent, and I do mean excellent, opening. When we first meet, when we meet Norman Bates again, and he opens the book, those first 2 or 3 chapters are excellent. So I would actually recommend reading this book for those chapters. And then as soon as the van burns up, you can put the book away, because it just plummets and turns into nonsense. It's an interesting backstory with this book, though. The studio were planning to make a sequel to the Alfred Hitchcock hit movie. And the author, Robert Bloch, he got word of this, so he decided that he wanted to write the screenplay, or he wanted to write the book that would then get made into the movie. So he, before they had written the screenplay, he hurried up and wrote this novel sequel. And but it turned out that the studio didn't like the novel much, so they went in a completely different direction. The movie is quite good. The Psycho 2 is a very good sequel. The book, not so much, but fantastic opening. Up next, we have Deadfall Hotel by Steve Raznik-Tem, with an average score of 3.19 stars. And this is a book that I did not care for either. It is essentially the story of a man and his daughter. His daughter, I think she might be 8 years old, young adolescent daughter, and her mother, his wife, just recently passed away. So it's a book about dealing with the grieving process and how is he going to raise the daughter himself alone. So he gets a job at the front desk of some hotel that has a strange clientele, like creatures and otherworldly beasts kind of thing. And so it's a dangerous environment for the daughter, because these are not exactly human clients, and the hotel is kind of bizarre as well. It's kind of magical in a dark way. But there really nothing happens in the book. It's just kind of they're in this strange environment, and he's worried about how he's going to raise his daughter. So I appreciate the ambition of the story. I mean, he's trying to make a very emotional story where nothing really happens, so that's quite difficult. So I do appreciate the ambition behind it, but it just doesn't really work. I mean, the central character doesn't do anything to get us to root for him, I feel bad that his wife died, obviously, but I need a reason to believe in him. I need a reason to root for him, and he's not faced with any specific obstacles or specific challenges to overcome. So it's a tough. It was kind of a dull read, unfortunately. But I have liked Steve Raznik-Tem's books before. I loved Bloodkin, and I would like to read more from him based on the strength of Bloodkin. not on the strength of Deadfall Hotel. Next up, quite a surprise, Atmospheric Disturbances by Rivka Galchin, with, again, a star rating of 3.19. Now, this is a strange book about this man. He has a neurological condition. I'm not sure what it's called. Actually, he has two neurological conditions. He thinks that his wife has been replaced, has been kidnapped and replaced with a replica. And he thinks that everything in his house has been replaced, by replicas. And he reads from somewhere, an academic book, I believe, or maybe even a newspaper, a weather report or some article about weather from a meteorologist in Iceland. And he believes that this meteorologist is trying to communicate with him by hidden messages in his academic papers on meteorology. So he becomes obsessed with this academic meteorologist. So it's a strange book with some interesting concepts. I think the author's father, if I'm not mistaken, was a meteorologist. So it's interesting that she explored that world as the obsession that this character goes on. And unfortunately for us as a reader, or for me as a reader, to have someone obsess about meteorology or academic meteorology, it meant that we had to read passages about very specific concepts in meteorology that were just is a little bit too. They don't lend themselves well to fiction narrative, so it got kind of heavy at times. And the protagonist, because he believes that his wife's been kidnapped and has been replaced by replica, he's actually really mean to her because he doesn't believe that she's his real wife. So he's the difficult character to root for. And it was kind of a slow read and not always super interesting. But the concepts are interesting there. A person with this kind of mindset, this kind of neurological condition is very interesting. I love, the reason why I read it is because I'm fascinated by the brain when it just goes off the rails a bit, in any form. I'm always going to be interested in stories like that. So what I will say about this book is that it introduces some interesting concepts. It takes a big chance about an obsession with a meteorologist. That's a daring choice from the author. It was not received well, unfortunately, but I do think she's a talented writer, and she's obviously courageous in her choices, so I would be interested in checking out more from her. Next up, we have Breed by Chase Novak, with an average star rating of 3.16. And I talk about this book in my video, Living in Ljubljana, Slovenia, because there's a passage in the book where the characters go to Ljubljana. This book is silly, very silly. It's a couple, like this rich couple in Manhattan, and they're not able to conceive a child. They really want to, so they try everything. Nothing works. Finally, they go see some mad scientist in Slovenia who gives them this potion for them to drink for several months, and it works. And they have children, twins, but they're something less than human. These children, and also drinking the potion for extended length of time, it turns them, the parents, into something that is less than human. Story is bonkers. It's quite silly, but it was fun to read. I mean, there's good action and it's well paced, but it is absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, if you want to read something silly and fun like that, and if you go into it knowing that it's nonsense, it could be a fun time. It's not terrible. I gave it 3 stars, so I'm generous. Next up, a big surprise for me, and that is El Anfitrión by Jorge Edwards, with, again, an average star rating of 3.16. Now, Jorge Edwards was more of a diplomat than an author. He was the Minister of Culture in Chile. He was also for a long time the ambassador to Chile in Paris, and he wrote, I think, maybe 6 or 7 novels while he was there. And I really like this book. I gave it 4 stars. I'm shocked that it's on this list. It's the story essentially of this Chilean exile during the Cold War, and he's living in East Berlin, and he's lonely and he's bored. And one night, this guy comes to him in a magical helicopter and takes him over the wall to West Berlin for a cocktail party. So it's magical realism, and I thought it was delightful. I really liked it. My guess as to why this book is on the list is because we're talking about the Cold War, like East versus West, and we have a Chilean exile. So I think readers kind of wanted a hard stance, like, oh, the West is bad, or the East is bad, or Chile is great. But the story is super nuanced, and it's really just about a man's loneliness, and he's disconnected from his country, and he feels kind of lost and lonely. So it's really a much more personal story, despite the context, the political and national context of the story. That's my guess as to why it's ranked this low, but it was quite enjoyable. Unfortunately, Jorge Edwards' books have never been translated. So, I mean, if you read Spanish, I think it's worth checking out. And if you like magical realism, I gave it 4 stars. Next up is The Quickening Maze by Adam Foulds. This book was nominated for the Booker Prize. That's why I ended up reading it. I think I read all the nominees that year. And it's essentially about, well, before I tell you what it's about, when I read this book, as soon as I was finished reading it, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I read the last page, close the book, and I say to myself, what did I just read? Like, I have no idea what I just read. It has something to do with a man who's losing his mind, which is great for me. I love those kind of stories. And he's in a sanitarium or a psychiatric hospital. So the hospital is more of occupational therapy. So they put the patients and they give them tasks to do. And this hospital is located on the edge of a forest. So our protagonist, who's losing his mind, he's really loves nature. He grew up with nature, and so he is physically in the asylum, but right on the edge of this gorgeous forest. And there's a poet who lives nearby, and he comes by and he visits him. So he has interactions with this poet and with literature and great ideas. So he's like right on the border of things that he loves and things that that stimulate him, except he's losing his mind and he is physically in the asylum. So this book, the way it's written, it's almost like poetry. It's not very clear what is happening. Also because we have the perspective of someone who's having a difficult time discerning the difference between reality and his fiction. So it's very difficult to follow the story. And I think that's probably why it's ranked so low. And actually all of Adam Foulds' books are ranked low, but they do very well with the literary critics. So he has that kind of style. I don't know. Emperor Has No Clothes? Or is there really something to the writing and to his storytelling? For me, I did not get much out of it. I had a difficult time following. But I will say that the concept is intriguing. I love the analogy, the physical placement of the character and how he is in an asylum but so close to everything he loves and to nature. And then having that also at the same time play out in his mind. That juxtaposition, that worked nicely. Fortunately, I didn't really understand the story beyond that. Next up is a book by another famous author. This is Psychopolis by Ian McEwan, which got to 3.02 stars. Now, Psychopolis, I just discovered when I was researching for this video. This is a book that was only published in French and German. And essentially, it's a short story collection. And it's just a collection of stories from Ian McEwan's first 2 collections. First Love, Last Rites, and In Between the Sheets. So this collection, Psychopolis, is just a selection of stories from those two collections, available in French or in German. And yeah, I thought this was okay. I gave it 3 stars. It's exploring people's sexual perversions, which I find fascinating, right? Unfortunately, they're just glimpses of these people. These stories, they just give us a little look as to what kind of perversions they're into, but without, taking the perversions to their logical conclusions or any conclusion, actually. None of these stories actually end, in my opinion. They just give us a glimpse and look how disturbed that person is. I liked it enough that I wanted to read more from Ian McEwan, and he's quite famous for Atonement. I think that's his biggest hit, and Amsterdam, 2 highly acclaimed books. Fortunately, I did not choose either of those. After this, I read Enduring Love, because also it deals with some neurological disturbances, something I'm really interested in, but it didn't work on me at all. So another case of probably a great author, and I just picked the wrong books to read from this author. I should probably give him a 3rd chance, though. Psychopolis, I didn't hate. I gave it 3 stars. So there was something to it. Coming up next is a surprise. This is by Peter Straub, A Dark Matter. The average star rating of 2.98. Wow. This won the Bram Stoker Award for Best Horror Novel of the Year. So some people liked it. Now this book is very slow, which is probably why it's ranked so low. When I read this book, it took me a long time to read it because it was just so slow. And when I was finished reading it, I said, oh, I'm glad that's over with. And I gave it 2 stars. But years later, I still think about it because it brings up some very interesting ideas. And so I look back on the story fondly, more so than when I was actually reading it. And having read other books by Peter Straub, actually the only other book I read was Ghost Story, which is also very slow. I think that's just his style of writing. I think he writes slow burns. So I'm surprised that this book is ranked so low. I would assume that people who read Peter Straub know that they're getting into something slow. And Dark Matter is much better than Ghost Story, in my opinion. Ghost Story was a classic. Dark Matter I prefer between the two. Here we have a group of friends at university, and they follow this spiritual leader who dabbles in the occult. They follow him into a field for some kind of ritual. The ritual goes very badly. Weird stuff happens. One of the friends dies. And then of the other people in this group, they're all affected in different ways, some quite extreme ways. Years later, one of the guys in the group, he's a successful novelist or a successful writer, and he decides he wants to write a book about the experience. So he goes and he and his wife, they track down the other members of this group to have them talk about their experiences. But I thought there was definitely some very interesting stuff that stuck in my head, stayed with me. Not a fun book to read, but one that did stay with me. Moving on, we have The Golden Shower, or What Men Want, by Luka Novak, with a 2.73 star rating. That is way too low for this book. Now, I gave this book 3 stars, but it's basically, it's a hard book to describe. It's this millionaire who wants to have a social revolution, and he thinks he's going to accomplish this by getting people to recreate famous works of art, but doing them in a more pornographic style. Somehow that's going to start a revolution. It's not just a millionaire, it's like a secret society that's led by a millionaire. The book is kind of farcical, it's almost like reading a cartoon in some instances. They go on wacky adventures. And it's not bad. It's not bad. I think my guess as to why it's ranked so low is that Luka Novak, the Slovenian writer, he is a television personality in Slovenia. He, I guess he had success with some television shows about food, about exploring Slovenia's culinary traditions. So I'm guessing that people probably read this book because they were fans of him on television as a television presenter, and fans of him, and they think of him as being someone who knows food and talks about food. There's no food at all in this book, so they were probably quite disappointed. But apparently, Mr. Novak, he likes other things besides food, such as golden showers. And lastly, the lowest rated book that I've read, according to Goodreads, is not a surprise. It's a terrible book. And that is Son of Rosemary by Ira Levin. Now, I love Ira Levin. Love me some Ira Levin. He's written some great books such as Rosemary's Baby, Stepford Wives, Boys from Brazil. He's written some great stuff. This was not one of them. I'm not sure why this book was written. This was the last book he wrote. Maybe he needed money. I don't know. I don't know the backstory behind this. He was definitely not interested in writing this book. It reads like a first draft. It reads like he didn't have an idea of what the story was. He just has these characters going around talking and snacking. Nothing really happens. And I'm not sure why the publisher put this out. It seems very cynical because it's obviously not a good book, and it was received terribly. But it has Ira Levin's name on it, and it has Rosemary, so the sequel to the hit, Rosemary's Baby. So they put it out just for a cash grab, but it's not good at all. And it also does. He makes an attempt to kind of destroy the classic that he was known for, Rosemary's Baby, because in this sequel I won't spoil it. Well, I guess I will spoil it because it's a terrible book. You shouldn't read it. But basically, at the end, Rosemary, she wakes up and it was all a dream. Everything in this book and in the first one. So, he really did not know what the story was. There isn't really a story. It's just Rosemary wakes up after a coma, and she just goes around talking to people and snacking, while her son, who's like a famous. He's famous and he wants to be some kind of spiritual leader. That's it. Just a lot of talking and a lot of snacking. And then at the end of the book, she wakes up again from a coma. Or not from a coma. She just wakes up from a bad dream, and everything was just a bad dream. And that's just a bad book. I did talk about this book in my video, Red Flags of Weak Writing. Because I warn writers about having your characters snack. It's a red flag that you don't really know what you want your characters to do, and you don't know how to drive the story forward. And Son of Rosemary is actually an excellent example of that. I do have to say something positive about this book, but I can't, can I? Oh, it would make for a fun. I don't know about fun. It would make for a good drinking game. You read the book and take a drink of something every time a character kisses another character on the cheek. Because for some reason, it happens a lot. So it's quirky in its badness. I'll give it that. Characters constantly kissing each other on the cheek and constantly snacking and doing very little of anything else. So those are the 10 worst or lowest rated books I have read, according to Goodreads. I am looking forward to exploring the 10 highest rated books. Unfortunately, I think when I do the video of the 10 highest rated books, according to Goodreads, that I've read, it's going to make me look like a grouch or a grump, because I don't really agree with those ratings. Here, at least, I was able to say something positive about books that people, to a large extent, don't like. So I feel like I'm making progress in my attempts to try to be more positive. Do you have any experience with any of the books that made this list, the lowest rated books that I've read according to Goodreads? Maybe you were able to find something positive about any one of these 10. And what is the lowest rated book on Goodreads that you have read? And can you say something positive about it? I look forward to connecting with you in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video.